Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and got a first impressions to do for you on this crazy little guy. This is a Spyderco Techno, which has been lent to me by my buddy YD Knives. His link will be in the description below. Thank you again to you, YD Knives. I appreciate it. This is a Spyderco that I have noticed for a long time. I have almost bought one a time or two when I've seen them on the secondary. And I've seen a lot of people give a lot of love to this model, but I've never pulled the trigger on one. And so I was really stoked to try one out because it's one of those that's been interesting, but I didn't necessarily see enough utility in to ever buy one. And I'm still not sure I do, but I'm really glad I'm checking it out. And this is just the first impression, so we'll see by the time the full review runs its course whether I'll be on the lookout for one to buy for myself. But it is really cool. Let me say that first and foremost. This one specifically is not quite bone stock. This one had been anodized by the owner who sold it to YD Knives, and then he de-anodized it. I'm not positive what process he used. I know he asked me about the process I use. I'm not sure if he used that and then sanded it or if he just sanded it, but it appears to have been at least sanded or buffed or something, because this is much shinier than, at least in pictures I've ever seen, a Techno. They usually have more of a kind of like a Spidey Chef texture on it, or a swish buoy, or whatever you want to call it. Which, speaking of which, this is the same designer as the swish buoy. This is a Marcin Swish. I think it's Swish, I've been told. It's one of his designs. So anyway, this one, I can see in like the nooks and crannies on it, there's still like bits of anodization that it didn't quite get to. But from what I understand, he got a really good deal on this because it had been anodized. So it's cool that he was able to pull most of the ano out, and now it's his own. Anyway, this is a Marcin Swish design, and it's CTS XHP, which is a great steel. I really like CTS XHP. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. It says Spyderco on this side. We've got the Spyderco Spider there. Here we've got the Maker's Mark and Taichung Taiwan. If you know me, you know I typically really like Taichung Spydercos. I don't usually keep them like forever Spydercos like I do a lot of my Golden Colorado ones, but there are exceptions, and I genuinely almost always find, in fact, I don't think I've ever not found a Taichung Spyderco to be really well made. They're great at making knives in that factory. So this one is a chunky little thing. It's very thick. The blade stock is, I knew it was thick on paper, and I knew from watching videos and seeing it in pictures that it was thick blade stock, but in person, my goodness, this is a stubby little blade. It's full flat ground, and it is not thin behind the edge. It's just so much blade stock that how could it be? It's sharp though, very, very sharp. I don't know if this is the factory edge. If it was resharpened, they did a great job. It's a nice edge on it that's workable. Like, this knife is going to cut through most anything, if not anything that a typical small EDC knife like this should. But I think where it really shines is kind of its size. Like, for really fine cutting tasks, this makes sense to me. The size and shape and profile of this knife, it'll be very controllable to use. Where it kind of falls apart though is if I was picking a knife of this size and shape and profile to be able to do fine work with, I'd want it to be very slicey and thin behind the edge. So it's kind of a conundrum there to me. But I will say the thickness makes it feel really, really cool. Like, there's something about a thick blade stock that just feels, I don't know if you guys share that sentiment, but to me it feels so, the meatiness is enjoyable. That's what she said. It's cool when a blade stock is really thick and it feels special. So this thick, short slab of XHP feels nice to me, but I don't think it's a functional decision. I think this knife is one of the least functional knives I've handled in quite a while. That might sound harsh. Not every knife that you buy has to be ultra functional. This knife, if I was going to own, I would carry it as a secondary. I don't know how often it would get carried with how poor I perceive it's going to be at slicing. Like, I opened a package with this already, and it did fine for opening a package. Of course it did. It's a knife. It has an edge on it. I can open a package with a pry bar. Like, it better be able to cut some tape and open a package, of course. But this knife would not be my choice for processing a bunch of cardboard or any real, like, cutting task. But for a secondary, unassuming little knife that you can pull out in front of people and they won't be scared by, and they'll probably just think looks kind of cool and cute even, sure, it works. Yeah, on first impressions, I genuinely don't think, now that I've held one, that this is a knife that I need to own. Or if I got one, like if I bought this knife, it was me who purchased it, I'd probably enjoy checking it out for a week or two, and then I would flip it. I would resell it. That's just the way I feel about it now. I'm going to keep having some more experiences with it. We'll see if at the end of the week that it's something that I end up falling in love with and really wanting to have. But for now, it's just kind of different, new. It feels unique, and it's exciting because I like knives, but it's not exciting because it's like, wow, this is so functional as a design. It's not. Anyone who tells you that this is one of the most functional designs, I question what they're doing with their knives. Because like this blade stock and how thick it is behind the edge, if this was a 4-inch blade knife with a bigger handle that ergonomically worked for me and was a robust frame lock like this, I would love that as an outdoor, like hardcore user knife. That would be great. But on a tiny little delicate knife, it doesn't make sense to me to be this thick and ground like this. If it was a hollow grind that got real thin behind the edge, then we could maybe be talking. But a flat grind with a blade stock this thick on a knife this short doesn't quite add up to me. This is the Techno 1, or just the Techno. There is also a Techno 2. I think I've got that right. I hope this isn't a Techno 2 and I'm calling it the wrong thing. I'm sure someone will correct me, but I'm going to assume this is the first Techno, and there's a Techno 2. I know there are some subtle differences. I think the blade shape is slightly different on the Techno 2. I don't know if it's ground different. I'll have to look into that, because maybe on the Techno 2, they address some of these things that I think makes this knife fall apart a little bit to me, but I don't remember it being a different grind or anything like that. Again, could be wrong. It's definitely perceivable that I'm wrong on that, but the Techno 1 to me is just like, it's a cool little different thing that is exciting if you love Spydercos and are into knives. And like, I'm glad I'm checking it out. It's fun to have in pocket. And the people who I've pulled it out in front of genuinely usually think it's pretty cool, because it's just a stubby little thing and it seems different. But I think that's kind of where it ends for me. This one also has this back spacer, which is, it looks like kind of a clear or natural G10 to me. It might be like a plastic of some sort. I don't think that's the factory backspacer. I don't know for sure. I'll have to ask YD Knives if he knows, or just look at some pictures. It works well though. It's got this kind of like geared pattern in it, and it feels good to me. The ergos of the knife are pretty good. It's, for being a small knife, I've held more comfortable, but it works. It's neutral enough that no spot on here feels like sharp or like my hand doesn't really want to go there. I find the best grip is if I choke all the way up here and put my middle finger right there. It might look a little funny the way my fingers are sitting at different heights, but in this hammer grip, it actually feels very comfortable. In a saber grip, it's comfortable as well. Then I move my pointer finger back to there, and my pinky is now off the knife. But if I'm choked up, I can get all 4 fingers on here. If I'm choked back, it's a 3-finger grip. The jimping is super non-aggressive. It's wide and rounded and frankly very comfortable. Do I think you need jimping on a knife this small? No, I would prefer that it wasn't jimped, if I'm being totally honest, but it's not bothersome jimping, so I'm going to give it a pass. Yeah, I guess it's funny. This knife just doesn't make all that much sense to me. I think, if I'm being totally honest, part of why this knife probably has a lot of hype behind it, if I'm just thinking out loud here, is because the swish buoy is probably like the grail of Spydercos for a lot of people. I would love to have a swish buoy. I've never even handled one. So many people rave about it so much that I'm very curious and would love to get one. I probably will eventually, but it probably won't be the run that already exists, if that makes sense. He's also, so the Swish buoy designed by the same guy as this knife, the Spidey Chef designed by the same guy as this knife. I think his designs at Spyderco have gained so much traction where so many people have become like a fan base for his work with Spyderco, that this being another collaboration between Marcin Swish. I apologize again if I'm saying that wrong. I'm sure somebody's yelling at their screen saying it's Marcin. I don't know. I imagine a lot of the people who love his work with Spyderco love this one too, because they feel like it's part of that collection, if you will, or part of that. I don't know. It's part of his influence within Spyderco, and because those other designs are so great, they feel like this is too because of that. But I kind of disagree. I don't think this is... It's not bad. It doesn't bother me. I don't hate this knife. I don't want to sound like I'm too harsh on it, but I don't think it's a great design for a knife to be actually used. So I guess that'll be that. We'll see if my opinion changes. Maybe it will. I'm open to that. I'm not setting out into this knife determined to dislike it, and I don't dislike it. I think it's interesting enough on its own. If I got a screaming deal on one, I'd buy one because it's fun and unique and different, and I love knives, and I like Spyderco, and it has a hole which is greater than studs. So there's all of that going for it, but it's not the most useful. It's not the most comfortable. There's things that I think it could be much, much better at. And from what I understand, I haven't looked at these new in a long time, but I don't remember them being very cheap. It's a fairly expensive knife for me to have this many meh feelings about. So there's that. I did, in my unboxing, try to Spidey flick it. I got it to work once. It's difficult to Spidey flick. That's another thing that, like, ugh. All right. I spider flick everything with a hole, and this one is difficult for me to... It's the way this action works best is to thumb roll it out, not even thumb flick it out. So that's another thing that part of what I love about most Spydercos is how I can play with them and Spidey flick them. And this one, if I get it just right, I can get it to work. And if there's anybody who's fidgeting with knives a lot and pretty good at spider flicking, I think it's... I'm not tooting my own horn too much to say that I'm good at it, but this knife feels like it's designed to be slow rolled out with your thumb, which is probably my least favorite way in the history of knives to open a knife. Do I open knives that are fun to fidget with like that sometimes when I'm going to actually use a knife? Yeah, because if I'm pulling a knife out of my pocket to use it, I'm in front of people and I just want to cut something real quick, that's great. Yeah, put it away. Okay. It's very unassuming. I don't need to pull it out and be flashy with it every time that I use a knife. But I also love to fidget with my knives. And so if I'm sitting still and in a moment where I can fidget with my knives, I want to be able to Spidey flick it. And I want it to be fun to do so, not a challenge that's like... This isn't like it's going to be fun to master. This is like, the geometry is just not good for Spidey flicking. It's doable. I've just shown you a couple of times. I can make it work, and the more I do it, the more I can kind of get it reliably, but it's still not 100% reliable. So I'll let all of that be that. Those are my first impressions of the Techno. It's a cool, interesting little thing. It's fine. I don't hate it, but I certainly don't love it. I really don't at this point. Maybe time will change that, but that's where we sit now. So Spyderco Techno is a... There you have it.